What's going on with Bitcoin?
Nico, it's really quite incredible. If you look at 22, when we had Celsius implode, for us, then Ethereum went to proof of stake from proof of work. And then we had FTX. In a 6-month period, we had to weather all those stories. Well, so did the whole crypto ecosystem have to really weather FTX blow up. The magnitude of the Binance algos allegedly hitting every bid, that they blew out $19 billion. They took money from, this is what's alleged out there, from accounts that were not part of this algo to take, and they were sold out. Binance only at the end of January comes out and says, I think they $300 million they gave money back. But what happened to the other, and who the guys that made money? So the retail component there lost their money. They got tapped out. And I've seen this happen back in the early 80s in the futures market, where they were able to determine on the Chicago board that there's a lot of people having stop losses at this level, and the market makers will then turn around and knock it down, and then they'd all get hit, get blown out, and then they take the prices back up. And that it's evolved that doesn't happen. It happened in the gold market. I know that JP Morgan's had traders that got found guilty in court. They've had to pay tens of millions of dollars in fines, where they would call spoof the market. They would look when the market's quiet and say, well, we've got a gazillion ounces of gold to sell. And they really haven't sold it, but then the market bids all dried up and prices fell. They quite often did that when the Chinese were going through their Chinese New Year, or it was in the first week of October when they celebrate Communist Year. So we know this from the gold world, and we know this from the commodities trading with copper, but it doesn't happen in that evolution today. But it is happening when you have an exchange like Binance that also has accounts. So you got to think of the New York Stock Exchange also having institutional retail trading right beside it. So where's that transparency? Well, front running is easy to do. So they see, oh, it's an algo, and they go and blame the Trump for going anti-China. The question begs itself, why didn't it happen April the 2nd last year? Why does it just happen at this time? $19 billion is 10 times the size, 10 times of FTX, where Sam Bankman fried the industry. So it's a big deal, and it breaks trust. And the other part is that the ETF world of retail investors and institutional investors in America had piled in almost $200 billion into the ETF space. And just after Bitcoin runs to $126,000, etc., this happens. And then some supposedly one hedge fund made of 1.2 billion. Well, what did they know? It just makes you so suspicious. Well, when you have too much suspicion like that, you have lack of trust and the integrity of the system. So I think that this whole thing and what Binance did and how they did the mea culpa, they go and blame it's on Trump. It's just not, I don't believe that. But it did hurt the overall industry, and it creates this thing called a contagion. It's a COVID type of virus starts spreading through, where trust, the element of trust of the Bitcoin ecosystem, was severely damaged by what they call was a bad algo. And I'd like to know, did they change the algo? Like what is it's the infrastructure of what was taking place. I think that something, if this happened in America in an exchange that's and a brokerage firm that's regulated, that fat figure, there would be a big investigation to basically foster trust within the ecosystem of capital markets. That's not happened yet with Binance and exactly what's taken place. So we know $19 billion gets spacked out. Someone allegedly makes $1.2 billion. Someone's made whole a bunch of hedge funds for 300 million. All those nuances create doubt, and they knock this thing down. And then we have, in the month of January, the Japanese carry trade. As Japanese rates rise, then hedge funds that borrow cheap money from Japan and go into more speculative investments start unwinding that trade. It's happened many times in the capital markets, just trying to understand how long does it last. Usually these bear cycles, what we just saw, are 4 months. So if it happened October the 10th, this week was February the 10th. So maybe the markets are going to get some love. They're going to be Valentine's Day weekend. We got President's Day weekend coming up, long weekend. And looking at the math of markets, forgetting all these nuances and who did what wrong, forget all of that. Just look at the volatility. We're down 2 standard deviations. Well, what does that mean when we look at Bitcoin down 2 standard deviations? Mathematically, that means we have a high probability of a 17 to a 35% rally. What is that? And how often has that happened in the past 5 years? Twice. It happened when China went and attacked the Bitcoin ecosystem by miners and traders, etc. And it happened when FTX blew up. So now we're 4 months later. I think that the worst is in the capital markets is behind us. And I remain bullish from that context.
That breakdown was fantastic, and the Binance aspect of it, Frank, to me is the most fascinating, because how much, Frank, the Clarity Act is a hot button issue today, right? Scott Bessent was on CNBC this morning talking about it, advocating for it. How much do you think how important is the Clarity Act for it to be passed? Because if that piece of legislation passes, you would think that Binance wouldn't be able to do what they did. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, there's negligence or gross negligence in their operations. That's clearly, and they don't care. He's worth 80 billion, the CEO, and they trade trillions of dollars. So that's what you're wrestling with. But I would believe that if it was in a domicile here, there'd be a big investigation. That's what I think. But it's an unregulated world there, and so that's, you have to be very nimble about it. I think that what's happening that only adds to the down 2 standard deviations is this drama over the stablecoin. So at first, when I was here the October 10th, I've become, okay, put on your conspiracy hat, because for me, it's China. And China, we know in San Antonio, Texas, where the NSA has a big operation, that the MSS, which is the KGB of Russia, has been attacking in cybersecurity attacks on the power systems in America, the telecom system. And so maybe they went to attack that chip, or that code they had, for the bot, the algo bot that made a big error. Maybe they hacked that to create that, because China is at war with the US dollar. And I know this so well from my world of gold. It's a war. And they have weaponized the BRICS nations from a handful of 5 countries to now over 12 to not do any commodity trading. That is, if they buy commodity China from Chile or Peru, they have to be in Chinese yuan. And so this war continues with those countries. So now those central banks that are part of the BRICS group, they become fearful, and they've been selling down the US dollar and owning gold. And that's part of the big rally last year, was more and more central banks do not want to get in between their foreign currency reserves between China and the US. So China is basically weaponizing the BRICS. And then they do something else. Their One Belt, One Road for the Marco Polo was about also 12 countries of the Silk Road trade. Well, that's grown to 150 countries, not 12 as originally planned. And they've now lent money to 75% of the countries that represent the United Nations. So there's moral suasion for those central banks that are there to be in US dollars, and it's showing up in buying of gold. And so that this idea of hurting the US dollar, and along comes Tether stablecoin, and they show that all emerging markets love the US dollar, and they become very, very wealthy because they collect the interest on that stablecoin, and billions of dollars go into the US dollar. And this administration recognizes the significance of stable coins, and there's a push to pay a coupon on that. They're calling it rewards, but really it's like a money market fund. And if you go back in the mutual fund history, I hope you haven't had too much, Nico, on this. But if
No,
you go,
I'm loving this, Frank. Keep going. Keep going.
so if you go back and Steve Jobs' great line about looking in the back, you can't predict the future. So what you do is you go back and you see and connect the dots. So if you look at the mutual fund industry, it really didn't take off until interest rates went to 20%. The banks couldn't pay those high yields, and money market fund, mutual fund companies could. So all of a sudden, billions of dollars go into mutual funds, and it becomes 30% of all mutual funds. And then those money market funds are paying high yields, and the S&Ls are able to get bailed out, and they can pay higher yields. And so money leaves the banks to go to S&Ls, and that becomes a crisis. But not with mutual funds. It doesn't become that crisis, but they go into mutual funds, and then those investors start buying stocks and technology ETF, and before ETFs. Now we have the evolution of mutual funds going into ETFs, and that's been now the fact last year that there's more ETFs than there are stocks. So that's a big tipping points that happen in capital markets. So it's recognizing the stable coin is very important to this administration. And Coinbase and other people are pushing that they can have rewards for that stable coin. That is, they will look like a money market fund paying you interest, but they'll be called rewards.
Yeah, and from my understanding,
banks don't want it.
yes, and my understanding. So we actually talked about this in the beginning of the show, Frank. My understanding is that the biggest hurdle that the Clarity Act has right now is the fact that the banks don't want Coinbase to offer those rewards for customers because banks are freaking out. That they see it as competition.
They're not just doing that. This is a delayed process. This is a process to get ahead of the curve. So Coinbase and Circle, all these other entities are much further along in fintech and in the digital fintech and digital money. And so they're trying to stifle that momentum they have so they can get their stable coins out and so that they can get traction with that ecosystem. And so we saw this, I wrote about this with Facebook. Facebook was like anti-Bitcoin on the first big run, anti-everything. Well, you know why? Because they were coming up with their own stable coin. And that upset the banks, and they immediately got the regulators, everyone to attack Facebook. Facebook ended up changing their name to Meta. Facebook turned around but their idea was called the Libra coin. And it was brilliant because it would be transformative for the whole world because they have billions of followers on Facebook, and all of a sudden they would have the Libra digital coin, and the government did not want that, and the banks clearly didn't want that. So they ended up selling their assets, and it went through this process, and it comes out they were anti. We have then JP Morgan, and they're anti-Bitcoin, they're anti the crypto ecosystem. Well, we find out there was in a lawsuit that one of the biggest miners of Ethereum was JP Morgan, and they were using AWS. So what they're doing, they're trying to get this big enough to make Ethereum to pivot into staking so that they would be the biggest player in the sandbox for Ethereum staking of coins. So this is what we're witnessing, but you know who throws a punch? China. China comes out with their one stable coin, and it will pay interest. And that's, once again, this is the fight. The global war is on. It's not nuclear missiles coming back and forth and drones hitting, and pray to God it doesn't happen. But there is this financial war. And what there is behind that is as Xi Jinping became dictator for life in 2018, he comes into power in 2012. He's got total control. So he has no institutions to hold him accountable. He will just do his purges like he did a few weeks ago, anyone that disagrees with him. So he is at this war, and what they've done in that sort of growth is they've increased their military navy that is now has more warships than America. There's all this espionage of stealing from Raytheon and Grumman and Boeing, their technology for Air Force weaponry. And so we're on this battle, and the Trump administration is really elevating this as saying, look at Europe, you have to cover your say, because if you don't cover your at least 2%, we're not going to cover you. Well, immediately they go to 2%, and now he's pushed 5%. So we are seeing this huge military spending, and it's about protection. And countries like Poland, whose stock market was up like 60% last year, they know darn well that they have to have a huge wall to stop all the illegals coming across from Belarus. And they know that Russia was weaponizing human beings. They were taking people from the Middle East to basically go in as illegal immigrants into Finland, into Poland and Hungary. So these countries, it doesn't meet the mainstream. So they're now becoming a protectionist. And what the administration did at the World Economic Forum a couple of weeks ago, they redefined what is taking place. So like 95, we create the World Trade Organization. Like 2003, I think China is brought into this world trade. It's globalization. It's a brilliant idea because it did work at the beginning, where if trade is first, then it creates jobs and takes people out of poverty. And it did that until China's Xi Jinping becomes dictator for life. And so we've seen this sort of pivot, and now it's becoming, well, globalization is going to take a backseat. It's going to be sovereign national security. That is first and foremost. So 5% of GDP of NATO countries have to spend. They're all looking for also data centers. We know this, that they need data centers for high performance computing, because all the new weaponry is NVIDIA chips, and they need high performance chips. So that is the new wave. It's not just open chat that everyone talks about is the big demand. No, it's also military for national security. So what the US government really showed at the World Economic Forum is that globalization, global trade is now taking a backseat to national security. And China is only helped under Xi Jinping to create this drama by attacking the US dollar. And so it's just what it is. So how do you manipulate these capital markets and where they're going? I think that the Bitcoin, there's a space, there's a guy named James Turk. You got to get him on your show about gold. But he always had this idea that the value of gold is the total FX and M2 of the world. And if you did that, then gold should be like $11,000. Because there's 8 billion ounces of gold known above surface around the world. So simple math, out of the numbers, divide one or the other. Well, when you do Bitcoin, we're talking 5 million.
No way. But wait, hold on, Frank. I want to unpack all of this. First of all, you just let me connect the dots as to why the Trump administration keeps saying this over and over again. Listen, if we don't get ahead of the curve on the crypto stuff and the AI stuff, China or Russia will. So you just connected the dots for me on that end. But I want to get back to the gold.
Talk about the gold. It's really interesting. If James Turk, I love this guy. He uses simply monetary aggregates that gold would be overvalued if it was above 11,000. And so you can turn around and say, okay, just in the ecosystem of America, America still has the most gold backing its currency, and China knows that become a global power as a currency, they have to have more gold, so they're continuing to buy the gold. What happens if America goes mark to market? Because their gold's carried on the books at $35 an ounce, not 5,000. What does that do to the money printing? So I think, that during this Trump era, we're probably going to get this push. I'm speculating now. This is just wild speculating for an old guy looking back and trying to connect the dots, that if you did go mark to market with your gold, because China's mark to market, these other central banks are basically, they're not buying gold at 5,000 and marking it down to 35. They're going mark to market. So if we mark the market, what would that mean? It would make our debt to equity really attractive compared to these other countries. And I will tell you that if Canada all of a sudden starts buying gold, they have big gold players at one time. They sold it all because of modern monetary theory and the ego that central bankers could outsmart gold with earning interest on foreign currencies. Well, that hasn't proven out well, especially when you get a leader like Justin Trudeau, who really hurt the country. The new guy, Carney's a really smart guy. He was Goldman Sachs. He was chairman of one of the largest infrastructure companies. The savviest player is called Brookfield. Brookfield owns 1 square kilometer downtown Dubai, where it's just under common law, not Sharia law in the United Emirates. It's really interesting. This is a smart guy that was also the head of the Central Bank of Canada and the only Canadian to become the head of the Central Bank of England. So he understands the capital markets. And what happens if Canada all of a sudden starts saying, we are going to buy all this gold that is mined in Canada for our own central bank? Well, that would create a re-rating of the Canadian dollar immediately, because the trust factor around the world of paper currencies has really gone down. The concept of stable money, Bitcoin, gold, alternative assets, they're growing. And these are sort of the big changes that are taking place.
Frank, I love having you on the show. So much signals being dropped. People are loving it as well. Thousands of people watching live across YouTube, Rumble, and X. Guys, you're listening to Frank Holmes, executive chairman of Hive Digital Technologies.
Gold hat. So you understand that it's a very 5,000-year-old concept of owning gold because it's so difficult to mine. The one thing common with Bitcoin is that it's electricity. You need to have energy and refining to make that ounce of gold. You need to have the same, you need energy to mine that Bitcoin. So really, I love when I hear Jensen talk and Elon Musk, that it's a bundle of electricity. The value of a Bitcoin is really the value of being able to create this movement around, and it's a bundle of electricity. And if you said, okay, it is a real wealth currency, then you could talk that it's worth millions. It'll take a lot more time than people think in the adoption. I think the U.S. government has to worry more about China that on the currency battle. But I never underestimate when America gets everyone involved in solving a problem. It's an incredible nation that pulls together. So I think that that's what we have to deal with. I just wish that President Trump would stop making attacks on Canadians the way it's being done. They'd never become the 51st state. If he did, the Republican Party would never become the Republican Party. It'd become the Democrat Party forever. I'm share this with you because what we're seeing in Canada, and being Canadian American, and I just spent last week at Harvard. I spent 60 hours case studies late at night going this stuff, and a lot was AI, and a lot of Canadians were there. So there was 180 CEOs from 80 countries around the world. Many self-made billionaires that built up a business outside of America, some inside. So you have to really respect them. And you have the chairman of Air Canada sitting beside me, and you have the chairman of other companies. So I am so humbled to be around these really smart people, and they give you what's taking place. Well, the Canadians are so upset about attacking. You can attack Justin Trudeau and everyone would cheer. You attack a Canadian and it's gloves off and it's a hockey fight. So what have they done? They canceled 3 million flights to America, to Florida, to South Carolina, to Texas, all the snowbirds. They're going to Latin America. They do not want for any penny to be in this country, and that's not good. That's not good karma. Canadians will not buy. The largest buyer of liquor in the world is the LCBO in Ontario. It's the biggest. No American wines, none. Can't get them in the restaurants. No bourbons, nothing from America.
I mean, it makes sense. Right?
Yeah.
It makes sense.
They're voting with their wallet. They're making a decision. And what blew me away was it's impacting locally in San Antonio, guys that own the 3-star hotels. I own the Hampton Inns over here. I have the Holiday Inn over here. Their rates are down really low. The only place that the rates that they can get that are profitable is Abilene, Texas, where the biggest Stargate AI boom from Bitcoin miners to tier 3, $500 billion spend. Those hotels, they're very profitable, but they're telling me about the tourism. So they used to get this tremendous traffic coming south, which it's not on Bloomberg yet. It's not on, and same thing with, I want to share with you on 1010. Why didn't this make the front page of the Wall Street Journal? It really shocked me. It didn't make Barron's, so it's going to make it on your program. And so what we're seeing is that we need allies. America just can't. I understand sovereignty, I understand the protection and security, but we still need allies. And there's favorite nation status is really important, especially when they have common law and they speak the same language. It can be Spanish and English in America, and it can be French and English, but the common element is English.
Yeah,
and the common element of rule of law is common law. We have
cultures.
To think this
the
way.
Cultures, Frank. The cultures are very, very similar. Like I go to Canada at least twice a year to Alberta, and again, the cultures between and I live in the very, very tip of the United States in South Florida. But again, the cultures are very similar. It's the similar language. You can understand each other, similar cultures, similar infrastructures, very similar. You don't feel like you're in Latin America if you're in Canada. It's very similar type of infrastructure, vibes, culture.
Absolutely. And you know what they export besides crazy guys like me? They export comedians. You know how many comedians in Hollywood, that were Canadians, and Saturday Night Live, they have the same program, live theater for stand-up comics in downtown Toronto and Chicago. I mean, but at any rate, I'm venting. I don't want to.
No, Frank. No, but Frank, you're onto something, because, and I've noticed this about the Bitcoin industry in particular. The ratio, meaning the amount of Bitcoin entrepreneurs that are Canadian, right, based on the population of the country, is extremely high. Like if you look at a lot of these companies, in the Bitcoin industry, a lot of these, hardware wallet manufacturers, a lot of these exchanges, a lot of these Bitcoin miners, they're Canadian. Right. And the ratio versus American, entrepreneurs, American companies, it's very high if you compare the populations of the two countries. So I've noticed.
And Hive being the first crypto mining company, it went public in Canada.
Yep.
And Nova Kratz's company, it followed right behind us. HODLing came right behind us. I found out that it was one of these mining disrupt events, and this is about 4 years ago. And they said that they really learned about using flare gas. They went to Alberta,
Yep.
And they came back to Texas and they scaled it bigger.
Yep.
Because there was more flare gas. But they went up and saw these small operators in Alberta that were using flare gas to mine Bitcoin and be very profitable. And I got a chuckle out of hearing that. Besides medias.
Shout out the upstream data guys. They're also based in Alberta, and they use the flared gas to turn that into Bitcoin. Anyways, Frank Holmes, blow my mind every time you come on the show. It's been an honor. You dropped so much signal for the chat. People were loving it. People asked some questions specifically about where they can see some videos on Bitcoin mining. Well, guys, go follow the @Hive Digital Technologies X account. There's a pinned tweet. You can see an amazing video about Hive's Bitcoin mining operations.
Especially
and also
you guys did a phenomenal job.
Thanks, Frank. And you could see it. You guys could see what Frank is talking about, because once you see it, you're like, oh my God, like this is a big deal. And then I want to end the show with this, Frank. We got a question on Rumble. And it really stuck out to me. And this is the last question from C-Suite. And he asked the question, why Hive?
Why Hive? Well, there's a whole litany of reasons why Hive. I would think it's just that we're the discipline on capital. We have consistently the highest returns on invested capital. We have the lowest SG&A to mine a Bitcoin. We are fleet of foot. We're the first to do AI. When you look at we're a very innovative company. We function over, think of this, we function over 9 time zones, 5 languages, 3 continents, and we have the lowest SG&A. And we have always in the top 1, 2, or 3 most efficient miners. So you think of that, that was what makes Hive special. And so Hive, I think, has this incredible future, and we're looking for opportunities in America where we can get the electricity in the land, and we'll land something that's very attractive, like we've been able to build it in Paraguay.
Need liquidity without having to sell your Bitcoin? For more than 6 years now, Ledn has been the trusted choice for Bitcoin-backed lending, with transparency, security, and trust at their core. I absolutely love these guys, and I personally not only have an account with them, but also a loan. And some of the key features that I love about Ledn is the fact that there are no monthly payments. You pay at the end of the term. You also have the ability to roll over the loan as well, and you can pay it back whenever you want. Essentially what they do is that they help their clients unlock the liquidity of their BTC, allowing you to HODL while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. They've been battle tested with their focus on transparency, security, and trust, allowing them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn more about what your BTC can do for you today. Simply Bitcoin viewers get 0.25% off their first loan by using the link in the video/podcast description. What are you waiting for? Head over to ledn.io today.